Hi, my name is Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss the damaging impact of the loss of a significant chunk of our workforce as a result of Brexit, which no doubt the gammons will be cheering even as it shrinks their pay packet, lowers their job prospects and makes our country poorer. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the result from the Brexit referendum of 2016 was, of course, so marginal that any little thing could have swung it, and indeed did. And one aspect to the so-called debate was famously immigration, and this was no small impact. The UK economy had been powered during our time as members of the EU with easy access to migrant workers. As people have pointed out, we needed more workers to drive the growth that we were seeing. But it's allowed populists to point at the increasing amount of immigration and blame it on society's ills. You know, your life isn't what you want it to be because of those people. We've all seen the cartoon, haven't we, with the oligarch with a huge pile of cookies warning the worker with a single cookie that that immigrant wants your cookie. The more immigration there was, the easier these lies were able to take hold. So much so that by 2016, enough people were convinced of two lies that eventually caused Brexit. One, that immigration was ruining their job prospects. They were somehow convinced that there is some inherent advantage in giving a foreign worker a job over someone raised in this country. Never been able to quite get an answer from these people as to why this would be, but there you are. Secondly, that this is because we are EU members, or rather were at the time. Never mind the fact that we had the loosest immigration controls in the EU, but the populists convinced people that being an EU member meant that you could have no immigration controls. That people could just come and go as they pleased, claim benefits without a job offer, all the rest of it. Both of these things were lies, but they were seductive lies. And now that EU-based immigration has gone into reverse, the gammons cheer, even though immigration overall has increased. It's just European migrants who are buggering off. But here's the thing, migrants weren't taking our jobs. We needed them in order to carry out work which otherwise wouldn't be done. And now it won't be done. I mean, we saw the lie last year. We were still in the single market, but the pandemic prevented farmers from having easy access to migrant labour for harvesting crops. Where was the army of British workers who were just itching to get those jobs previously taken by migrant labour? Nowhere to be seen, which is why we had a lot of crops just rotting in fields. And don't get me wrong, I do get why it's so confusing for people who are a little bit limited in this, and I don't mean that offensively. You know, they think, well, we've got unemployment in the UK. That means we've got British citizens who don't have a job. Well, then you've got foreign workers doing jobs. Well, if we didn't have the foreign workers, then those British unemployed would do those jobs. Totally get that line of thinking. But the thing is, it doesn't work out that way. It's not true. And we've seen that it's not true last year. And what's more, we're going to continue to see how very untrue it is in the future. And for more than just farming. Because not everyone can do every job. The jobs are not always where those unemployed British people are. In fact, location is one of the biggest issues. You don't see the most vacancies where there are the largest number of unemployed. In fact, that would be utter madness. Quite the reverse, in fact. Figures from February showed I think actually it was January, but I saw the report in February, showed the biggest emigration of foreign workers since World War II. There was a report in Bloomberg from earlier this year that showed that London alone had lost about 700,000 workers. Now, it made the point that this has multiple implications. One, those people were earning and paying taxes. Now, it didn't mention this, but I will put this in. Remember that those foreign workers pay more in taxes than British workers. This is grossly unfair. In my opinion, grossly unfair. But they have to pay the NHS surcharge, for example, in order to be able to access healthcare services. That means foreign workers pay more for the NHS than British workers. So even if it were the case that the loss of a foreign worker would result in an unemployed British citizen getting that job, which, as I say, is not generally the case, but if it were, that would still mean less money for the NHS. What is it now? £625 a person? It might be a bit more now, actually. But £625 a person, I think, and the loss of those 700,000 workers from London, that's nearly £500 million, wiped off the already underfunded NHS. Then there's the rest of the taxes they pay, all contributing to public services. And given that we have a highly inefficient Conservative government who prioritise kickbacks for their mates and donors, you know, those are lost taxes we cannot afford to be without. The second implication is for businesses itself. Now, the report talked about landlords losing out for the rent that these workers would have been paying, you know, talking about the fact that, you know, average amount of rent had gone down in London. I'm not absolutely convinced that I'm as concerned by that as other things, I have to say. That'll just make rent cheaper for others. I can't imagine there's a lack of demand for accommodation in London if the price is right. Not that I wish to have no sympathy for landlords or certain landlords, but at the end of the day, if the accommodation's cheaper, that's not always a bad thing. However, that is still 700,000 pay packets not being spent in the local shops, on transport or on services. That loss of custom, even in a metropolis as huge as London, is going to mean some businesses going under. Or even for businesses that don't go under, some staff being let go because there's not as much work. That will mean more jobs lost, British jobs lost, and as those workers lose their jobs and income, they will not be spending as much themselves because they haven't got as much money to spend. So even more businesses will go under and more jobs will be lost. These are just the figures for London, which is a big old chunk of it. You know, I saw a report earlier this year that suggests we may have lost about 1.3 million across the UK. So that's about the same amount again around the rest of the UK. And these figures, by the way, cover a period largely before the pandemic. It did run across the first wave last year. And if it has accelerated since, it'll be even worse. But it takes a while to get the figures, of course, and to get those figures accurate. They're never really bang up to date. They're always like a couple of years out of date, really, if you want the most up-to-date, accurate figures. But Brexit is damaging enough, really. The trade barriers that we have chosen to erect already make it more difficult to do business with others. But if you add into the equation the struggle to attract workers to drive economic growth, then even for businesses, you imagine some businesses, they're going to be affected by Brexit to different degrees. Some businesses will be able to cope with Brexit. It doesn't personally hit them that badly. But if they can't attract the workers that they need, then they're still not going to be able to manage growth. You know, so businesses are going to struggle not just because of the trade barriers, but also because of the barriers to getting the workers they need. In reality, immigration didn't really cost jobs for British citizens. Sure, you could argue at the moment that if unemployment goes absolutely skyrockets, then there will be some British workers who will benefit from that in some ways with the jobs that need to be done. But the net effect is that immigration doesn't cost jobs for British citizens because it helps generate them by powering a stronger economy and having more pay packets being spent, more businesses can develop than would otherwise be the case. Because those businesses where the pay packets are spent, shops and basic services, they can employ people who may not have the skills to do the jobs we need to power the overall economy, to produce the goods that we need to sell abroad, which is how we make our money, but they can still generate a bit of growth, share the wealth, so to speak. People just don't see the interconnectivity between jobs. They also don't see the fact that many of the jobs taken up by these migrant workers are short term. Seasonal even, in the case of farming, for example, or in the hospitality industry. We do not have a ready source of this labour in the UK. We saw that last year. And both the attitude and the legislation spewing forth from Brexit makes it difficult to impossible to attract this labour from abroad. You know, reports like this keep talking about, or what happens if they don't come back after the pandemic. They're not coming back after the pandemic. Why would they? They're treated very poorly in this country now. The immigration legislation is going to make it very difficult for them, if not impossible, and they'll get a better deal back home. In other words, we haven't just hit our economy with the damage from trade barriers, we are keeping it constrained for the long-term future due to a lack of the labour needed to fashion any sort of economic recovery after the pandemic. If the Conservatives have any serious ambitions for growth, they're going to have to work out how to attract EU migrant labour again very quickly. I suspect they'd rather work on just blaming others for it. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.